Deuteronomy chapter 19, and we'll continue through the Bible, finding ourselves in the book of Deuteronomy. And again, we're reminded of the theme of it, and that is obedience. And it is once again a 3-sermon series by Moses to the children of Israel, by the Holy Spirit, of the importance of obedience. We pick it up in chapter 19. And the Lord gives instruction to the children of Israel as it relates to the cities of refuge that He wants set up inside of the land. When the Lord your God has cut off the nations whose land the Lord your God is giving you, and you dispossess them and dwell in their cities and in their houses, you shall separate 3 cities for yourself in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you to possess. They've already established 3 cities of refuge on the east side of the Jordan River, and now God tells them to establish 3 more on the west side of the Jordan River in the actual land that God is giving to them. And you shall prepare roads for yourself and divide into 3 parts the territory of your land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, that any manslayer may flee there. And so the cities of refuge were to be within a day's run for any person who needed them. And so they were to be spread out in the land, and they were to be there was to be sufficient roads established linking the cities of refuge so that a person could quickly get to one of those cities of refuge. Now he speaks about what the cities of refuge are about and why they'd been established in verse 4. And this is the case of the manslayer. We would call it we call it manslaughter today, who flees there, that he may live. Whoever kills his neighbor unintentionally, not premeditated, accidentally, not having hated him in time past, again, not premeditated, great danger of hatred, make you do amazing things, isn't it? True? So we allow the Lord to search our hearts tonight. Do I hate someone tonight? Do I need to be very careful? Satan can be very crafty in his manipulation of that, to put us in a place that we'd never want to be. As when a man goes, and he describes what an accident or an unintentional death of a neighbor might be now in verse 5, as when a man goes to the woods with his neighbor to cut timber, innocent enough, and his hand swings a stroke with the axe to cut down the tree, and the head slips from the handle and strikes the neighbor so that he dies, he shall flee to one of these cities and live. Lest the avenger of blood, while his anger is hot, pursue the manslayer and overtake him, because the way is long, and kill him, though he was not worthy of death, since he had not hated the victim in time past. God is very, very concerned about justice among His people, and there was to be, with this avenger of blood, if you were to, in that day and in that age, they didn't have police forces. And so if you came into my family, immediate family or extended family, and you killed a family member of mine, then it was the responsibility of the avenger of blood to take and to slay the person who had murdered one of your family members. And under the law, he was free to do that. He was the avenger of blood. And to take and murder a member of my family was not just an act against the person that you murdered. It was an act against the entire family. Families operated that way. There was that kind of closeness even among extended family. So a cold-blooded murder never got away with it. But there was no police force to call It was the responsibility of the avenger of blood, the person who had the highest position within the family, the person that had the birthright within the family, to make sure that justice was performed. And justice, under the law, was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, life for life, limb for limb. And that meant that the murderer was to be put to death. But what about the case of the person who accidentally murdered someone? Again, we call it manslaughter. Though those lines have become very skewed in this day and in this age. But if someone were to be accidentally killed by the axe head, as he illustrates here, immediately the family would be in an uproar. Their anger would be great at the loss of their family member, and yet the person who had lost the axe head and had been a part of the murder of the other person or the manslaughter of the other person was innocent. There was no malice. There was no premeditation. There was no reason for him to be slain for that. That man was free to run to one of the cities of refuge in order that then the religious leaders in the nation of Israel could review the facts and determine whether it were an accident or not. God did not want people's blood to be shed in His land based upon wrath. Not in the cold-blooded murder of another person, and not on the part of the avenger of blood. So He wasn't to do it when He was hot with His anger. So the cities were supposed to be in a place where a man could get to one of them quickly enough if he wasn't worthy of death so that he could be protected. In verse 7, therefore I command you, saying, you shall separate 3 cities for yourself. Now, if the Lord your God enlarges your territory as He swore to your fathers and gives you the land which He promised to give to your fathers, and if you keep all these commandments and do them, which I command you today, to love the Lord your God and to walk always in His ways, then you shall add 3 more cities for yourself besides these 3. So, God had intended for the children of Israel to occupy and to possess a far larger geographical section of land than they ever possessed. And we'll get into that more completely in the book of Joshua. But if they had been obedient and possessed the fullness of the land that God had intended them to possess, then there would have been a need for 3 more cities for people to flee to in order that they would be close enough for the purpose of the cities of refuge. But they never obeyed completely enough for that to happen. And He gives the purpose of these cities of refuge in verse 10. Lest innocent blood, the Lord is always concerned about the shedding of innocent blood, lest innocent blood be shed in the midst of your land, which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, and thus blood guiltiness be brought upon you. But if anyone hates his neighbor, lies in wait for him, rises against him, and strikes him mortally, premeditated murder, so that he dies, and he flees to the cities of one of these cities, then the elders of his city shall send and bring him from there, deliver him over to the hand of the avenger of blood, that he may die. And so, murder, a capital crime, cold-blooded murder, and again, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, life for life, and the cold-blooded murder was to receive a death sentence at the hand of the avenger of blood. So the Lord was careful to protect the shedding of innocent blood as it related to the manslayer, and yet He was also careful that the land would not take upon it the stain of continual shedding of innocent blood on the part of murderers. He noticed that, and it brought blood guiltiness upon the entire nation. And God didn't want blood guiltiness to be upon the entire nation. It makes you wonder how God sees our land. The shedding of innocent blood. Just this weekend, the high school boy came to the United States with his parents 11 years ago for a shot at a better life from Poland. You'd have to visit Poland 11 years ago to understand what kind of dreams a family like that might have in terms of opportunity in the United States of America. And he's sitting at a stop sign and waiting for his chance to go, and someone didn't like the way he looked and pulled a gun out and shot him dead. I can watch a newscast like that and hardly be shocked anymore. I have to go to the Lord continually. Lord, keep my heart soft as it relates to this crime. I don't want to become used to it because it's around me the way that it is. Hardly anything shocks me anymore. But the Lord sees all of it. He sees all of it. Every innocent life, every bit of blood, He sees it. And we need to remember as His people that it's a serious issue. And there's a judgment that comes upon a people and upon a nation for that. The failure to protect, the failure to bring forth proper judgment in the protection of people. God has great concern about justice. And there was to be no refuge for the premeditated murder. And He says in verse 13, your eye shall not pity him. The issue is not personality. Don't look at him and say, oh, he looks just like my son. Oh, he looks just like my father. He just looks like this or that. There was to be not that kind of pity. The issue was not personality. The issue was justice. What was right for the victim? What was right for the murderer? And what was right for the society as a whole? The protection of society as a whole. And so He warned them against that tendency to pity him. But you shall put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may be well with you. And He in effect warns the nation and warns the leaders of the nation that if they would not be careful to implement His justice, and their eye began to pity under this covenant of the law, the murderer, then He said, not only then no longer is the murderer the one that becomes judged, but now the entire nation is judged by God. So they had a responsibility to fulfill His word and His law. Now, how does all of this fit with us today? I mean, is capital punishment a yay or a nay? Or are we supposed to be compassionate or not compassionate? Are we supposed to be forgiving or unforgiving? Are we supposed to be merciful or gracious, or unmerciful and ungracious? How does this law fit for us? We're told in the New Testament that as Christians we are not under the law of Moses. We're not under it. But the Bible teaches that man, prior to coming to know the Lord, is under the law. The law is there to reveal sin, the depth of sin, the seriousness of sin, the fact that everyone is a sinner. And so this was established for the order and the structure of a society. Now that doesn't mean that as a Christian, if I go out and cold-blooded murder someone, that I can just say, hey, whoa, Judge, I'm a Christian. I'm not under that old covenant. I'm not under, the legal system that our legal system based upon the laws of the Old Testament. And so I'm just going to be expecting grace and mercy from you. No. We break the law, we break the law, and there's consequences to breaking the law. But this law was established for the ungodly. And so we see its place in that nation for the proper order of the nation. Verse 14, you shall not remove your neighbor's landmark, the ancient landmark. That was the markers that indicated the boundaries of a person's property. They were not to be removed, which the men of old have set. In your inheritance, which you will inherit in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. So there was to be respect for property. I'm not free to steal another person's property. They were not free to steal another person's property. And a man's livelihood depended upon his property and the proper cultivation of that. And they weren't free to go in and rob another person's ability to provide for himself. They weren't to oppress other people. So there was to be honesty as it related to other people's possessions and respect for their property. One witness shall not rise against a man concerning any iniquity or sin that he commits. By the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses the matter shall be established. So, if someone were accused of committing a crime and only one person witnessed it, the person could not be convicted based upon one eyewitness. It was one person's word against another person's word. No one was convicted based upon that. But he could be convicted based upon 2 or more witnesses. That's what was required. 2 or more eyewitnesses to establish guilt. If a false witness rises against any man to testify him of wrongdoing. Now God establishes within His judicial system a means by which to protect the integrity of the system. And the system is only as good as the honesty of the people who were involved in the system. And so you had to deal harshly with liars, perjurers in the legal system. It's kind of interesting today, isn't it, that you go to take the stand in a trial today in the United States of America. Do you swear to tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? So help you God? This nation? Who cares? And what does that mean to an atheist? What does that mean to an agnostic? There's no fear there as it relates to saying what is right. And so he establishes something to protect the integrity of the system of justice, and the system has to be devised for the false witness. So if a false witness rises against any man to testify against him of wrongdoing, then both men in the controversy shall stand, number 1, before the Lord, before the priests and the judges who serve in those days. And the judges shall make diligent inquiry, they'll investigate. And indeed, if the witness is a false witness who has testified falsely against his brother, then you shall do to him as he thought to have done to his brother. I think that's a fairly effective deterrent. And so you shall put away the evil person from among you, and those who remain shall hear and fear hereafter. They shall not again commit such evil among you. Your eye shall not pity, but life shall be for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. So I testify against my neighbor, and say I testify against him for stealing or something, and perhaps the law might have been that his hand would be cut off. And they find out that I've testified falsely against him, and so as a perjurer, my hand would be cut off. What would be the effect of it? Oh, it would have no effect. No, it would have no big deal. Nobody would really take notice of it. It wouldn't have any impact on man's behavior. I mean, there's no deterrent value to swift justice, swift and equal justice. I mean, people would forget it immediately. God said, no, it'll put a fear in people. They'll think before they lie. They'll think about their hands. They'll think about their eyes. They'll think about their life when there's a potential of losing it. So God seems to be a very firm believer in the deterrence value of swift and fair justice. It's a part of that nation. When you go out to battle, as he gives them instruction now concerning war, and notice that word when. It's never an issue of if we go out to battle. We're in a battle. Now their warfare was a physical warfare. Our warfare is a spiritual warfare that we're all involved in as Christians. So it's not an issue of if, but it's an issue of when. And notice that there are times here as he talks to them, when you go out. They were to be on the offensive in terms of God leading them in what He wanted them to do. When you go out to battle against your enemies, and they would have enemies, and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than you, that's the continual plight of God's people through the ages, is when they go into a battle, into a spiritual warfare, whatever it might be, there is always that realization that in terms of resources, we are outnumbered. You look at the control of the halls of power in our nation, and I don't even mean Congress. I don't even mean the White House. I mean CNN, NBC, CBS. They may hold maybe the greatest power in some senses today. And we look at how puny our weapons can appear at times in making stands for the Lord. And the first thing that we see in any call that God calls us to as it relates to serving Him and being a part of the battle that we're involved in, aligned with Him, we immediately become conscious of how great the weaponry and resources and numbers of the enemy are. But that's not what we're to put our focus on. That's the tendency, this warfare that we're in. God is very real. Satan is very real, and he's very real in his